Now hand over to Saista. Please, Saista.
Thank you so much, Bharat. Um, Hi, everyone. Welcome. Jai Bhim. Assalamu alaikum. And Ramzan Mubarak to all of us who are Muslims here and observe Ramzan. And just to, ground myself as well, I am a Dalit and Muslim Pakistani academic. I work as assistant professor in ethnic studies at University of California, San Diego, and also a co-founder of the UC Collective for Caste Abolition. And if you are interested in workshops, of course, Bahujan Mentoring Network is going to put on more events, and so are we, for how to apply for to how to apply to American universities in particular, because that's our context, or North America in general, and how to apply for funds, how to apply for or how to do networking. And our focus always has been Dalit and Bahujan, Adivasi, and Muslims. And so, especially if you are part of any of these groups, please do follow us on social media. We are only on Twitter for now, but we do have a website as well where we put in announcements. So with that, I am very, very happy and excited to welcome Professors Sangeeta Kamath and Bonnie Zaire. And I'm going to read their bio in just a second, but I do want to say that, particularly those of you here who are graduate students and who work with, you know, uh, either Savarna or white scholars who draw on Dalit communities, who work with Dalit communities, I implore you to ask your supervisors and folks.
Grant वगैरह को लेकर है, fellowship वगैरह को लेकर.
I'm going to mute you.
Hello, excuse me. Sorry, please mute your mic. Please, everyone. Sorry, Saista, go ahead.
No, it's okay. So those of you who work with either Savarna or white folks who work with particularly draw on Dalits and Muslim or Adivasi communities, please, I implore you to encourage your supervisors to do to support you in networking, to really, really train you in how to apply for funds and all of these things, rather than relying on more of us Dalits and Muslims who are very, very thinly stretched in academia and do tons of labor that doesn't make it into our CVs to do this work. So I did want to start with that because, by the time I think most of us are 35, we are almost near the end of our lives because of how thinly stretched we are in academia. So with that, I am going to read bios for Professor Sangeeta Kamath and Professor Bonnie Zaire. So Professor Sangeeta Kamath is Professor of International and Comparative Education at UMass Amherst. She's an alumni of TIFS Mumbai and received her PhD in Social and Comparative Analysis from University of Pittsburgh. Her research interests concern neoliberalism, inequality and education, globalization and Hindu nationalism in India and the diaspora, caste dynamics in education and NGOs, social movements, and state relations. She was awarded the AIAS Senior Fellowship in 2012 for research on privatization of education in Hyderabad and the Obama Singh Higher Education Knowledge Initiative grant in 2014 for a 3-year collaborative project with Pune University to study campus climate and inclusion issues. Welcome, Professor Kamath. Professor Bonnie Zaire is the Director of Women's and Gender Studies at Virginia Tech. She has made yearly stays in India since 2002, focusing on Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Her research focuses on discourses of identity, feminism, and activism in contemporary India. Professor Zaire's articles have appeared in Women's Studies, International Forum, Humanity and Society, and South Asian Review, among others. She is on the international board of Arthi for Girls, an organization which helps low-income girls in Andhra Pradesh. During the pandemic, she invited Dalit Bahujan scholars to form a small Ambedkarite reading circle. This led to a multi-phase research project. The project includes conducting What is Caste Privilege workshops in both United States and India. Welcome, Professor Zaire. And I'll hand it over to you both.
Thank you.
Oh,
thank you so much, Bharat, for organizing, and Shaista for moderating today, and also just for all of you for joining us today. Um, I've been, of course, having conversations with Bharat about, the Bahujan Scholars Network and how to really support the work that he and many others are doing here in North America. And one of the, we've had webinars on various topics, and one of the things I thought was also really important was sort of just sort of nuts and bolts around, and some kinds of just talking through sort of, the do's and don'ts of applying for fellowships and grants, because of course, one realizes that, the institution, our universities don't often provide sort of any kind of real mentoring or, some structured kinds of opportunities in which to kind of really learn about this. And so, that we often are expected to sort of just, rely on our own initiative, and very sort of, an individual kind of initiative to find, the opportunities, apply sort of, on our own without much support. And so we felt like maybe beginning this conversation around how does one go about, some of the things that we have learned through our own experiences that we can share with you. And then also just to hear from you, your experiences of, when you have, your own success stories or difficulties or challenges that you faced and where you would like help. It would also be something that we could, starting this as a, it's more kind of a starting the conversation to then maybe it's going to evolve into something that's going to be more focused, or ways in which we can create, have the support network, really support each other on these particular kinds of, efforts of seeking out grants or research funding, or fellowships or opportunities to also come, and be in the US or Europe, to work, right? And so this is really much more kind of a workshopy sort of format that we have thought about, where we want to share certain kinds of, very basic sort of do's and don'ts and outlines, but we also would like you to kind of, give you an opportunity in this workshop to look, go and look at sort of the grant funding opportunities that your institutions offer, or things that you have identified that you're wanting to apply for, that you plan to apply for, that you and maybe bring that back to, to us, that we, and we can sort of discuss more in a more focused way as well in this hour and a half that we have. Bonnie, maybe you want to give a little, opening. We're kind of running this sort of back and forth. We're going to do back and forth. We're not going to be doing, we don't want to be lecturing at you when this is not to do, this is more kind of a really helpful how-to workshop. Yeah, Bonnie.
Yeah. Well, first of all, welcome everyone. It's really, really heartening to see so many people on a Sunday morning, a Sunday evening for some, be together like this. So again, I just want to say thank you, and Jai Bhim. The first thing I want to say, because it's not obvious, is don't forget to collaborate. So I do find that I have been more successful and more energized when putting together a proposal with colleagues or peers, and that could cross disciplines, or it could cross some different kinds of topic areas. But I think people are also impressed by the idea of people working together and harnessing their talents and their knowledge in different fields. So that would be the first thing I wanted to center.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really an important point, because I think often, the whole PhD process itself is a very solitary sort of endeavor. And, but I think even through the PhD process and post PhD, as, also young scholars, to really be looking to find collaborators, as Bonnie said. I think that because increasingly now what you see also in the social sciences and humanities, and also in the pure sciences, is that funders are, and grantees are looking for interdisciplinary kinds of research. And so they do want to kind of see, collaborations emerge. It could be an institutional collaboration. It could be, with somebody in another institution, but also in your own institution across, departments and fields, or different bodies of literature, really, and scholarship that you're bringing together might be in your own, particular field and discipline. But I think that, one is I feel like also that makes the process more enjoyable. It makes it so much more something that's rewarding for yourself, rather than keeping this as a very individual, isolated and solitary process. And I think there's also, it's much more interesting for the funders and the grantees to be, they get more excited also when they see this kinds of cross, field collaborations or cross thematic kinds of collaborations and links that are being made. Yeah. And so there's more chance of also success when you're doing those kinds of, that kind of work. But of course, not many of the grants that one is expected to apply for, like the Fulbright, etc., right, Bonnie? The AIIS, they really are giving it to the individual. So there's doing collaborative projects, sometimes it's not even sort of there, in the scope of the grant. And some grants actually do. There's a NEH, for instance, the National Endowment of Humanities in the US has sort of specific grants just for collaborative projects, right? And so, that's something to look at. I know several of you are in India, and some of you may be looking for grant opportunities or research sort of, funding, etc., within India itself, which I have to confess, I'm not, very familiar with what is available in India. But if there are others, on this, on this call today, that would, share, opportunities that they know of or things that they think would be useful, please do. And you can also just please use the chat function to type in, any information that you feel might be helpful to all of us attending here. I know Nirved Kumar, who joined us from IIM Ahmedabad, for instance, I'm on his, I invited him to join today because I'm on his PhD committee at IIM Ahmedabad as an external. But his work is very much on looking at all the fellowship programs in India. And it seems like there's a ton of that. There's a sort of mushrooming of the fellowship programs that a lot of young people are applying for, which might be a 1 year to 2 year or a 3 year fellowship that often then gives you sort of a certain kind of a, start point to, develop your work or your research or thinking about your PhD or higher studies and so forth. So he has actually a list of all the fellowship programs. I'm sure he'd be happy to share with you all if you do want. We can ask for that information to be shared also on this network. Yeah. But yeah, if there's anything that's specific to India that we are really missing out, that we are not addressing, that you really want addressed, please just raise your hand or put it in the chat. And because we have many people here who can pitch in perhaps and provide information that we may not, Bonnie and I may not have at our fingertips. But we are very much more familiar with working in the US context. And I think North America also has actually a little bit of a different tradition where actually there is a lot more government-funded grant opportunities and funding opportunities that are much more, I think, related to the kind that you have in UK and Europe. In the US, there isn't that so much of the kind of really government, more large-scale government collaborative team-based projects as there are, I think, in Canada and Europe and the UK. Yeah, I think that's part of the American culture of being very, individualistic, and collaboration is something much more sort of recent in the academic space as well. Bonnie, if there's things that you want to add.
Would you be all right, Sangeeta, if I went ahead and shared slides for a moment?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. I'm hoping that the multiple participants can share slides setting is on, but if not, Bharat, I may have to have you help me out. Oh, yes, I do need to have permission from someone, maybe from
Bharat.
I already
moderator.
provided co-host access.
Okay. Wonderful. So I promise not to bore you. I'm going to make this, quite short and quite to the point. But I'm also kind of excited to kind of look back over my 20+ year career and think about what is it that they're looking for. So the first thing I just want to give the advice of, and we can also obviously share these slides after this, who is your audience? Think about the people either from your university or the agency who will read the proposal. What are their mission and goals? What are their values? How is what you want to do aligned with what they are all about? And of course, if it's your university or your department, they should have some kind of mission statement on their website. And don't hesitate to use their exact words when you are speaking to them and in your statement. And you may feel a little silly doing that, but it's actually advice I've not only been given, but seen everywhere in successful proposals, because part of what it does is it anchors you in their mindset and it shows you've done your homework. You know who it is you're writing to and what their objective is, and they like to see that in your proposal. And then how much do these readers know about what you are interested in? Of course, the answer to that question means how much background you need to provide for them. Are they already pretty knowledgeable, or are they starting from maybe a complete, 0 point of knowledge? And so therefore you're going to have to give a few more details. And finally, what kind of information will they find to be the most persuasive? Will it be numbers? Will it be statistics? Or if this is a group that is not so quantitative, will it be qualitative? Will it be descriptive examples, case studies, newspaper headlines? What kinds of things might they be persuaded by? Attack the writing task by first knowing your answers to these questions. What are the particular expectations for this grant? How do you establish your ability to carry out this research? You don't have to be the world's greatest expert, but you do need to put yourself forward as someone who has either insider knowledge or a good deal of studying that went into this subject matter. And what is the best style for a grant proposal? The answer is maybe not what you're expecting if you haven't written one yet. The answer is to be direct as possible. So save some of your flowery phrasing or your metaphors. I mean, you might use one figure of speech or metaphor if it's really, really appropriate to what you're doing, but basically they're looking for, to the point, these are my goals. I see that you are going to have these criteria when judging this grant application, and then answer each of those criteria, naming them by name. Because again, they're reading so many of these. So when they see those words, they kind of, oh yes, this is exactly what we were looking for. Now I'm going to check this off the list, right? Because they have to rank them and they often have a rubric. And so you're going to make their job easier if you go ahead and quote their words at them. the project's outcomes should be what they call SMART: specific, measurable, if at all possible, achievable, realistic, and timely. Now, many humanities folks are with us on the call today, so I know that you can tie the project to something recent that happened, even if you're talking about older literature, right? Just try to make a more contemporary connection to show the contemporary relevance. When it comes to the word measurable, the second bullet point, I know those of you who are in public health might have a little bit more sense of what that would mean for you. For folks in the humanities, the word measurable is not always as easy to feel warm and good about, but you can also talk about what it is that you're trying to either rank or determine or judge. This was not something that I would have thought of on my own, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been translated into kind of an educational context in this diagram. And I was given the advice early on to try to connect your project description. You don't have to refer specifically to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but try to think about what it is in terms of a value or values that your project is speaking to, because these are fundamental building blocks that we are all interested in as a society. I think I just have 2 more slides. So this one says, before you write, there's a couple of things you need to do. And notice the quote on the right: grant seeking is more about knowing what to do rather than how to write, because as I said, it's a pretty direct style. So of course, your first step is to try to develop an actionable plan for what you want to do and why you're doing it. If you were giving a speech, the same thing would be true. So you could almost think of it that way, like, what would you be talking about and why should the audience hear about it? And then in terms of this grant, think about how your plan will achieve positive results. Of course, locate the granting organization. Research that organization if you don't already know it, if it's not your university. Review the guidelines very, very carefully, as I've mentioned before. And finally, see if you can find some projects that have gotten successful grants, because that will help you to have models to imitate. And it'll also show you what they value. It'll show you what they're most interested in. Just very quickly, here are just a few more tips. I'm not going to read this all to you, but this idea is that you can go ahead and number some of the steps, like this project's 3 main goals are, this plan will involve 4 stages. Of course, you're going to try to really tailor what you're saying to the grant, the specific grant. Go after grants of all sizes. We haven't talked about budget yet, but I'll let Sangeeta lead the way with that in a moment. And notice this: don't give up. Keep on writing. Writing a grant proposal is hard work. It requires you to closely analyze your vision and consider critically how your solution or your project will respond to a gap, problem, or deficiency. And often, even for seasoned grant writers, you get a rejection. But while you don't always get a yes, the process of writing the grant is extremely informative to you for your research, and often you will get very helpful feedback. So even with the no comes the gift of, here are different things to consider, which is so useful to a scholar. And then finally, just 2 quick sources: the University of Wisconsin Guide for Students on Writing Grants, which you can Google exactly like that, which I drew a lot of these tips from. And the best grant writing exercises to improve your grants looks like a kind of weird commercial site, but then it has a whole bunch of other sources. And I noticed it looked quite helpful. So I will stop sharing slides now and turn the mic back over to Sangeeta.
Hi, thank you so much, Bonnie, for that. These are sort of like, yeah, I think some, just going through some really basic ground rules that, many people, who've been like maybe really in academia or, have been, you know, I think exposed to a lot of, being in academia for a long time, we kind of have learned this along the way. And, but it's really helpful to have some of these basic, what are more kind of almost common sense kinds of norms and guidelines in grant writing. It's great to like have these very intentionally sort of, and at the get-go of sort of your starting to plan or contemplate writing a grant. And I just want to emphasize a couple of things that Bonnie had on her slides, and because these are the times when, grants or applications, for research fellowships or funding gets rejected, is when you don't do sort of a very explicit linking of the review criteria. And every grant will have a list of their review criteria. And you don't sort of actually in your narrative link your, your grant, whether it's your activities, your concept, you're not linking it explicitly to the review criteria, they often then get rejected. You might feel, oh, it's obvious. But, what Bonnie was saying, they're reading like, sort of dozens and dozens at a time. So when you make that and, underline, that's one of the things I did for my AIIs. For instance, the first time I applied for the AII senior fellowship, I got a rejection. And then I redid it and I applied again. And one of the things I did, because, they make you write, you have to write things very succinctly. So very sharp and focused. You don't have a lot of words to waste, right? So that's part of the practice. And that's why it needs a lot of iterations. You can't write like, this is my first or second draft and be like, okay, this is done, right? You really, it has to go, you have to start like way in advance, maybe almost, sometimes 5-6 months in advance at least, to to apply for whether it's the full, even if the Fulbright, I would say like 4-5 months in advance, and or the AIIs. And I would use the underline function to kind of make sure that their attention goes to that particular phrasing or their review criteria, or these are my research questions, or very clearly. So I would use the underline function because you don't have other ways to actually draw their attention, so you don't want to waste space sometimes in doing bullet. You're given like 6 pages, you have to write everything, right? The other thing that I think really helps for, you have to have a really good title, by the way. Titling is very important, right? And drawing their attention to doing your title in an interesting way, in a provocative way, in a unique way, is really important. And then framing your question or your main sort of, the thrust of your research problem, framing it in an intriguing way, in a way that intrigues them, where they're like, oh yeah, we don't know the answer to this. This is something we really have, don't like, like even though, we might be very well read and widely read and we're all senior scholars, oh, this is something actually, I'm really sort of clueless about. I don't, and that making it intriguing is really, can be really a very good way to kind of get their attention and get sort of more points on your proposal. Everything is a point system, right? So you need to kind of make sure, like, you're covering everything to get the maximum points on clarity, on conciseness, on matching the review criteria, on situating the importance of your problem and your research in the literature, and showing why this is sort of important or pressing, like now, thinking about having a very realistic work plan. What are the activities you're going to do to meet your research goals, objectives? Having a very realistic and detailed, as a specific a work plan. as concrete a work plan, tangible a work plan, that will get higher points, right? And really being able to situate the significance and uniqueness of your project. So it can't be just significant to you, but it needs to be also showing that it's unique in not, people have not really done this work or answered these questions. And also its significance for whether it's, you're going to say it's significant for policymakers or for other scholars in the field, for teachers. They like to see as many audiences that your research is going to actually be relevant to, not one narrow audience, right? But if you have multiple audiences that your research is going to really, where your research is going to be relevant or useful or interesting for them to whether to shape policy, to shape future new research in the field. And then to also for teachers in terms of classrooms or application or curriculum development, those kinds of things are also something that get, a lot of strong sort of points and recommendations from reviewers. And not really avoiding jargon, right? So much of our PhD education is about learning the jargon. But in writing a grant proposal, you almost have to give that up. You have to abandon that. Do not show off any jargon. Do not show off sort of, that this theory or that theory, etc. Because every proposal is always read not by your specialist audience. It's always read by people from different fields. There'll be some people exactly in your field who are marking your application, but there'll be a whole bunch of people who are not in your field but are allied, maybe like in some sociology or history or political science, etc. And it has to speak to them. They have to be able to understand and learn without having to do any reference work or look it up on Google or any of that, right? So you really have to speak to that kind of generalist audience and know using jargon, right? Really being able to explain your ideas in as simple and clear a manner in everyday, ordinary sort of English. And if you have a special term to be able to, that has to be really key in your proposal, not something that is there just, in passing.
Would you go ahead and talk about the budget as well?
Yes, I mean, budget is not something usually in every institution, there is a research grants office. And often they're the ones who actually are very specialized and they will help with the budget. And so I've often taken the more, the research grant office folks in my university to kind of help, I might do some rough numbers, but they are the ones who will, say, break this down. Or, we have to give a budget justification. Why are you putting this number for this activity? So you have to also, there has to be a justification that is sort of a separate document often, or just underline under the budget item, you have to put a 2-line description. So, be sure that, you're really justifying your budget well. And in the US, there is a whole, template, actually, there's a links, we can also share these links about saying, this is the federal government sort of, like if you're doing research in India, in, this city or this location, or that's, anywhere in South Asia, any country actually, they'll say they have numbers for what they consider to be sort of, the average sort of, living expenses. So they'll have a figure for living expenses, whether it's in Bombay or Delhi or Bhopal or, right, or like, 2-tier city. And you have to use that living expense to calculate in your budget, right? So you can't go by something you might know, or, right? So in fact, we often tend to count, right? Because we're used to living cheaply, or we know something can be, right? But actually the government, US government has its own figures, which, are pretty reasonable and, decent numbers that you can then use to kind of actually calculate your living expenses if you're doing, whether it's a 6-month residency, etc. And they have the same for the US, like, so US cities. So you should use that, to develop your budget. Bonnie, was there something else you had in mind in terms of budget specifically that I'm missing?
I don't. I think you explained that well. We have a question in the chat. Mahesh writes, is there a web link for a list of PhD dissertation fellowships for US-based students in the social sciences? Maybe this is a good segue first to talk about the AIIS.
Yes, yes, yes. This is, I'm trying to find the question exactly also. And also Shaista had a very good question about framing research questions, which is really the toughest part of a grant application, no doubt. And you have to do multiple iterations to get it right. Where is the,
It's I can read it. So it's
yeah,
the
please read it.
yeah, it's the very last question from Mahesh
Ah.
Mankar, and they say, is there a web link for list of PhD dissertation fellowships for US-based students in social sciences?
You know, the one is it's very helpful to go to programs that have, like, especially if you're thinking about doing your research in South Asia. So it all depends, right? Where your regional sort of, you know, your research region is going to be. But suppose you're doing, you know, PhD, you want to do your PhD dissertation in South Asia, right? Whether it's India, Bangladesh, Nepal, etc. It's very, very helpful. I think I would suggest your first point of, you know, research should be going to one of the South Asia universities which have a South Asia program, right? These are Title 6, right? Or titles, yeah, programs which are only certain few universities are approved for having South Asia centers or South Asia programs. And, you know, I can quickly share a link in, you know, list in chat of the main ones. But like, for instance, University of Pennsylvania has, University of Wisconsin, Madison has, UC Berkeley, you know, Columbia University, Rutgers also has. So I would say go to the South Asia program website of these universities. They usually will have a list of whatever is available for PhD students or graduate students research, right, in the region. The two very common ones that students and faculty apply for, there's an American Institute of Indian Studies and American Institute of Pakistan Studies. There is also Sri Lankan Studies, American Institute of Sri Lankan Studies, and I believe Nepal. I'm not sure about Bangladesh. Maybe they have something, but there will be. American Institute of Indian Studies is, of course, something that, you know, many of us have applied for, and also as PhD students, as well as then later as faculty. They have junior fellowships for faculty, they have senior fellowships, and they have dissertation fellowships, they have pre-dissertation fellowships. There are also mentoring workshops that you can apply for to be part of the AIIS, like a mentoring, like in your preparation for your dissertation, or for a book writing grant, you know, if you're a new scholar who from your dissertation you want to convert into a book. So there's a whole bunch of that is American Institute of Indian Studies that is funded really by, you know, the US government, that comes from, you know, the sort of Kennedy era. And you know, getting, you know, feedback, you know, when you do a AII's grant proposal, really getting feedback from maybe others who have had success in applying for AII's, but otherwise also both your advisor, but other maybe scholars in your field, getting them to read it and give you feedback and being able to revise is going to be really helpful. And, you know, this is like to Shaista's point as well, like, because the research objectives, you know, both have to be, they're both specialized, right? Because they're very specific to your research topic. At the same time, they have to be accessible and meaningful and easily understood by a generalist. You know, they might be India scholars or Pakistan study scholars, but they might be working in so many different themes and you know, from different disciplines. It has to be accessible to them and be, you know, relate to them, you know, right away. So you have to really, you know, framing those research questions is like key, and getting people to read and give you feedback who are sort of your fellow peers, from your advisors or other people in the field, is going to be key. And I think that's one of the things, you know, I'm sure in the, you know, in a more long-term objective of the Bahujan Scholars Network is also to be able to figure out how to link people who are in the field, both as senior or young scholars or peers who can actually also, give feedback to, that we can give feedback to one another on our, draft proposals to, and that's something that I think, is one of the, goals of the scholar network. There's a raised hand.
Sorry, I don't see it. Whoever is raising their Zoom hand, please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. I'm putting some things in the chat as well.
I think Shaista, okay. Tasneem.
Tasneem.
So I have a very essential question is like that if I'm going to attempt a kind of research proposal and English proficiency test and everything like SOP and CV and everything, but what kind of essential aspect one needs to attempt if someone really wants to pursue a PhD, especially in the American academia? Like, is it leadership quality and things are really necessary, and publications also? So I have a very blur idea regarding this, but if someone really can clarify this kind of question, so it would be really easier for us to just cross the river over there, because this all are the points are really mentioned with all the websites, but what kind of gist to just get into the PhD? Because it's answers. I always receive the answer is like that there are multiple applications and we have selected some of the best applications. What kind of best applications they have received so far, which it's not being considered, including mine. So yeah, here is the question. Like apart from research projects and experience and everything, what kind of
Sure,
best
Tasneem. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Like, it can be so frustrating because you feel like it's a black hole and, you don't know who you're sort of really writing to and what they're really assessing when you're applying for a PhD, to a PhD program. And then you just get like this one line kind of, saying, yes, we had a lot of competitive grants and, sorry, we could select very few. And, we could do a separate workshop also on this, but to give very a brief sort of response. One is again what Bonnie was saying, with PhD programs also you got to do your homework, right? You got to know like who are the faculty there and what kind of work they do and whether your work interest connects with their areas of interest. It may not be, that they're doing interest in South Asia or any of that, or your particular topic, but somewhere where there's a connection that you can see that there is, but then they would be interested in the kind of topic that you are, stating in your SOP, right? That you are sort of writing in your SOP, your research focus. If they kind of see, oh yeah, this interests me, this connects in some way to my research interest, and then they kind of become almost an advocate for you on the admissions committee, right? They kind of say, oh, I really like this person's application. I would like to work with this person. I would like to be their advisor because their research topic connects with mine. So as a PhD applicant, a lot of your, work has to be way before to look at different programs and specific faculty profiles, what they have written and published on and worked on, and being able to connect your SOP with their work, and their research interests, right? And sometimes being able to say in your SOP, I have looked at not sometimes actually, that's a very good idea to always do it, to say, I've, in your department, I've looked at, this faculty and this faculty and this faculty's interests really connect with mine and I would like to work with them. And, this is how their work connects with mine. When you make those really explicit connections, then your PhD application has a higher chance, because otherwise, faculty also want to work with people whose work connects with them, right? It sort of like gives them also like, rather than any sort of random sort of PhD application, you know, uh, area of research that has no connection with them, you have to think it's a big long-term investment, it's 5, 7 years, 8 years, right? So that faculty has to be excited and feel like, yes, working with this person is going to lead to some like, long-term collaborations, or these are research topics that are, they'll be part of my research community in a sense, right? It's not just you as an individual researcher, but everybody's building intellectual and research and scholarly and activist communities when they take in a PhD, certain PhD students, right? Yeah, I hope that helps.
Thank you, Sangeeta. I also want to say, and I think Bharat also mentioned that there will be separate workshops on how to write your statements, how to apply, how to connect with grad students before you send in your applications, because, scholars on paper are not always the kind of people that you might want to work with. And so that's also really important. And I'm just going to read the next question, if that's okay. So Shika says, my challenge with grant applications are not having enough reviewers who are familiar with the grant. For example, when I was applying for FRQSC, Quebec-based grant, I only had one reviewer who was aware about the application process. Are there any suggestions around on how to look for reviewers for our applications?
Shika, is your question about getting feedback before you submit the application?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Bonnie. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what I
Advice.
would do in that situation. So it is a little bit about trying to find a network. If you could ask people you even know just a little bit to recommend somebody who would know a little bit more about that topic, for instance. So it does take maybe a little bit of time to do that. And so you have to start preparing a little bit earlier because of that. That might be one way to handle it. There's obviously people out there who could give you feedback, and then the hope would be that you know someone who's at least, distantly connected enough to introduce you by email and say, could you please just give a quick look at this person's proposal? That would be my suggestion. Anything else, Sangeeta?
Yeah, one of the things, I've found, and this is certainly there at many, universities, I think in the US, and I'm sure it's there in Canada, that your research grants office in your university will have a list of all the ones, faculty or grad students have been successful in applying or have gone through the application for that grant in previous years, right? They will have a database. And you need to reach out to the staff person there, the administrator, and kind of say, I'm looking for someone who's applied for this grant in past years, and to be put in touch with them. And because you're a grad student there, they are in a sense obligated, to share with you all the resources they have to help you make a successful application, right? That is your right. So know that is your right? And sort of go and ask for whoever's applied for these grants in previous years. It might have been 5 years ago, and they got a successful grant. They're somewhere there in the university, or they moved on. But you can then reach out to them, or if they're in your university, of course, the research grant office can put you in touch directly and say, we have a PhD student who's applying for this, and would you please? And invariably, you will get some, help, and go meet that person for coffee, and make it
Yeah,
also.
exactly.
Don't do all this online. Don't do all this electronically. Sometimes it's so helpful to just say you make an appointment, meet for coffee, or go into their office and do a face-to-face, right?
Yeah, I also want to just stress, you can send more than one email. The amount of email that some of us get is like a constant waterfall. And so if we ignore it or don't see it, it's not at all personal. We might have even written you an answer in our mind and not have written it down on the screen. So do not hesitate to say, hi again, just wondering if, you might have time for this, because you can really have great intentions and then let things go by the side. So
yeah, thanks for that, Bonnie. never take that personally when you don't hear back. Always know that, everybody, they just overextend and overburden, and email is like the gift that never stops giving. So you need to, and we kind of then recognize, okay, this student is really serious when they persist.
Yeah.
So that also makes us say, okay, we're going to take this more seriously rather than this is a one-off kind of email that they just sent. Maybe they're sending it to 6 other people.
Right.
But when you persist and you send a second or a third follow-up, then you're like, okay, no, this student is serious and we need to, give them our attention. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was a good suggestion. Like, I'm in a process of applying for postdoctoral fellowships as well. So I was looking through several scholarships and I came across, and also suggested by Shaista, like presidential fellowship, postdoc fellowship. So I look for the people who got it and I'll reach out in advance to them and have them review my application.
And sometimes people are happy to even share their application. So you can, say, can you share your, draft or your version, so it helps you really learn when you look at successful models.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
We have 20 minutes more. Bonnie, do you think we should have them look at application to see what they think was good or not good, right, about that application?
Sure. So I have something I'm going to put in the chat in just a moment. There's a page 1 and a page 2. There's a lot of words, and if I were to ask you to read it very slowly and carefully, you wouldn't have time in this short amount of time that we have. So what I would request is that you just take a moment to start to take in what each paragraph is doing. I will tell you in advance, this proposal was not successful. So I was given this proposal at a workshop to try to pick it apart and say, why didn't it get funded? So it will not be obvious. The mistakes will not be obvious, but go ahead and maybe take a moment to just start thinking about what you could improve. And then maybe we can get back together, in like 5-7 minutes. So let me go ahead and put that in the chat. Or attempt to do so.
I think this is the NEH.
Yes. So there's page 1, and now page 2 is coming. Yeah, so National Endowment for the Humanities proposal. And sorry, it's not super clean. It has some handwriting on it, but I just didn't have time to clean it up for you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my video for a moment while I reread it as well.
Вниманию наземных сил. Код усмирить. Гражданин, вы обвиняетесь в несоответствии 2-го уровня.
Okay, you have 1 minute left, and it's okay if you haven't finished, but we're gonna get your reaction and share a few thoughts. Okay, could I just invite anyone to say anything about this proposal? Any sentence at all that you want to point our attention to, or any reaction you want to share? The floor is open.
Sorry, Bonnie, can I just say where it says, I'm going to send it to Kurdish friends? And it says, no, I'm sorry, that made me chuckle. So I just want to share that.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing you think and you might actually do, but you don't put it in the grant proposal. It's not the main way you're going to get feedback. Yeah. Or try to get a critical eye.
There is no breakup of $40,000, like how it will be.
True.
Can you, sorry, just to start the conversation again, can you talk about what does it mean to say that this proposal is dead on arrival? Because I think that is really key.
Yeah, it was very, I remember at the time I wrote it down because I was a little shocked. It sounded so harsh to me, but the National Endowment for the Humanities person who was conducting the workshop said that there were a couple of things that would make the proposal immediately be put to the side. So I'm going to go ahead and share them with you. The main problem is that the person doesn't seem to know what audience they're speaking to. For instance, if they want the US administration or government or military to know more about Iraq and to understand this culture better, how is this particular study going to help that? You know, vaguely one could say it could help, but it's just too vague. The people she's going to be studying seem shadowy. There's no timeline, specific timeline, right? There's not enough brackets around, is it everybody's songs? Is it everybody's, sort of celebrations of the culture that will be studied? It's not specific enough. And then who is the intended audience? Discuss more relevance was kind of said over and over. And then if we look at the bottom of page 1, it says, so this was the strategy this writer used. She said, only a handful of books look at Kurdish culture, such as this one and this one. And there's this essay about oral traditions, but there's been no full study. Now, in general, that's a pretty decent strategy, right? You're showing the gap in the literature. But what the grant proposal administrators said was instead try to find a book that has had a major impact on changing people's views about a culture and then compare your future study to that. So show some kind of successful model, and then you could talk about how yours is in a different area of the world. That was one particular way to handle this. I think what they were also trying to say is that it's not enough to say there's a gap in the literature. You have to, make it more meaningful than just, I don't see that somebody else has done this exact same thing, right?
when you kind of, just read it, like it seems like, oh, it's like it's hitting all the points of saying, okay, this is what I want to study, and this is my, this is where it's coming from because I was in Iraq and this thing, and this is, and it seems, yes, interesting enough. But it's about sort of really, looking at what each sentence is doing and whether it's doing the work of being really precise, really, looking at sort of, the, the review criteria to really be able to match them as, really sort of very, very well. Yeah. I was just looking for seeing where I could find my AII's successful proposal to share, like the first, page even, but somehow I can't find it on this laptop. I'm gonna have to, yeah. But
Yeah, maybe you could share it like later with the whole group,
yeah,
WhatsApp.
yeah. But even I had to go through, yeah, I wrote one not successful one. Actually, I think that came up on my search just now. I could share the non-successful one. um, but and then me having to revise and write it in a way that the
Well, and I guess we should be really clear that the National Endowment of for the Humanities, for instance, is probably one of the most competitive, and it can be really difficult. And the proposal can be damn good, but not get funded, right? So we are showing you an example from a really high competitive moment. If you look at, for instance, if you are a PhD student in the United States, which is what I can speak to, and you have a small internal grant in which you either want to bring a speaker in or you want to, collaborate on a particular project and be able to say gift cards to your interviewees, that is a completely different level of competition. It's still competitive, but it's not going to be you can get coaching and you can try again and you can kind of feel as though there are people around you who are also kind of invested in your success. So, there's quite a scale that we're talking about in the same phone call, right?
Yeah, the NEH has only a 7% success rate, apparently, because of the kind of yeah. Yeah, I could share the screen on, actually, I did find it in my, I could share sort of for you to just look at sort of the opening of
please do.
This was the successful one, yeah. Okay. Let's see, where's the share screen?
Saying you can share. I provided
Yeah.
to a co-host here.
Okay. So this was sort of the opening. And it's sort of, I think it's a 6-page. They don't allow you more than 6. But I've almost tried to use the header for the title so I don't take up space, separate space for the title.
Could you talk about the title, Provincial Globalization? Because that
Yeah,
gets my attention immediately.
Right. So that's the part of sort of, trying to create a title that's also going to be sort of unique and intriguing and show sort of the uniqueness of maybe the research sort of study. So I, kind of, saying that, even though Andhra Pradesh is sort of very globalized, it's sort of this, hub of sort of, seen as the Silicon Valley of India, and it's the hub of sort of liberalization and globalization, that there is, it needs to be understood as a unique kind of context or, a regional variation of globalization. That is not something that you can even, say is, relates to the rest of India, and being able to understand it as a unique version of a kind of globalization. So I sort of, yeah, pull that and, I'm not, I might be explaining it. This has been some years now. But then it's framing those research questions, Shaista, you were asking about, right?
Actually, we probably need a whole session on framing
Yeah.
research questions, which is a great idea.
Right. Um,
Could you keep it a little bit moved down so we could see those
Yeah.
questions? Yeah,
Sure.
thanks.
Sorry, Sangeeta, do you want to, we just have like 3 minutes left, and I was just
Yeah, we need to wrap up,
you-
right?
no, if you just want to rephrase, or if you think it was the way you framed the questions that led to it not getting the award, like if you, or
This
if
one got the award.
Oh,
I'm
it
showing
did.
you the successful one. There was a previous one that did not, yeah. That I could pull up, and it actually has a very different opening. It does not have the provincial globalization. I kind of reframed the thing to be much more specific. Yeah, that was so much more broader in terms of globalization and the earlier one that I'd done. But I know we're out of time, but we could definitely do something that is, later, that is on.
Very quickly, I want to say, notice how she creates suspense with the words, the curious pattern of 4 states dominating professional education. Like that immediately makes me very, very
Mhm.
determined to know why. And also thinking to myself, there's like a puzzle here, right? And now I really want to know the answer to the puzzle.
Yeah, really shaping, using language that can really sort of heighten the intrigue or the suspense. Yeah.
So perhaps we can stop sharing now and
Yeah.
say a goodbye. But I do want to
Yeah.
crack a
The
very
one
bad
and a half
joke.
hour did go by much faster for me than we thought it would, right? Yeah.
It did. And
Um,
I do want to just on a humorous note, just for one moment, say I had no idea when I turned on the camera that I was displaying my husband's whiskey collection, but it is a whiskey called Writer's Tears. So I thought it was kind of funny to show you that, in fact, to write is to suffer, but in fact, it's still so worth it.
Thanks for that. Yes, we do need reminders, that even though it can be torturous, it can feel torturous. We have to also figure out ways that we can make it rewarding, both the process and then be able to also, enjoy the rewards of it after, yeah. And having, making sure you have support, making sure you identify people who can give you feedback, that may not be in your immediate circle, please, that's like an essential, when you're trying to write for grants or applications or for your PhD, yeah, or postdoctoral or any of it, yeah. Hopefully this network is also going to be a source for you for support. Yeah.
It's a real pleasure to meet you all.
Yes. Thank you all so much. I don't know, Shaista, Bharat, if you want to have any closing comments, remarks, or any next steps.
Shaista, please.
I just want to say thank you so much for this labor, and I'm sure you saw in the chat too that there's so much appreciation, for both of you and for you, Bharat, for organizing this space. And I hope that we can have a workshop, a next workshop that is limited to maybe 15 people who bring in their research proposals and questions, and we actually go through a few as an example, because it's hard, even to find time to do this with our own students. So I just really appreciate it and want to say thank you.
My one final recommendation I really want to make is there is the annual South Asia conference in Madison, Wisconsin. It's held every year for like decades and decades. And, so regardless of your discipline, your, research topic, it's a place where y'all can all apply, y'all can create panels together, you can do individual submissions, but it'll be a place for all of us to meet. And also then maybe have a workshop at face to face, maybe if, a bunch of us are there at the South Asia, it's always held in October. And the application, actually conference call for proposals is out now.
Yes, the deadline is April 1st to submit. And
Yeah.
also there is the option of possibly doing an online panel if you don't think you could make it. So there is both online and in-person opportunities.
Thanks for that, Bonnie. And nowadays, most conferences have also an online component, but because that's a great way to find others who are also connect with your research topics, because they'll join, and also get feedback and develop sort of your then grant and funding proposals as well, or find collaborators to develop your grant proposals. But if you can also do it sort of, for those of us who are in North America, in or even in India, like we have lots of scholars from India come for that Madison conference. So think of that as maybe a meeting place to submit and create, and you can do it for next year, plan it. So put together panels of people who have common interests and shared interests. And we can sort of make that a sort of a place where you get funded to be there, but you can spend an extra day, etc. And then we can even do a workshop. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sangeeta, Boni, and Saista. And I can say I took some notes, and I would say that certainly we'll do the follow-up session, what Sangeeta and Boni you recommended. So we'll come up with some idea and some format, and we'll take it forward. And thank you all. And please give your feedback, your response, so we can improve and we can organize this kind of event frequently and regularly. Thank you all. Bye.
Okay. Yeah. Look forward to seeing you all again. Bye.